It's easy on this channel to talk about like classic games that everyone knows and everyone's played, and have people sort of listen along or watch along and nod their heads and stroke their chins and say, yes, I knew this all along, thank you for confirming my opinions on the matter. And it'd be easy to do that. With the Random DOS Game Show, I come across all kinds of weird, forgotten games that, never really amounted to anything. Through that, I really enjoy when I come across a game that's actually good. The shareware version is for DOS. It runs like absolute butter. It's great, it's very playable, and if you want 20 minutes of your life to just be spent blowing up loads of spaceships and asteroids and all kinds of stuff like that, then it's a great way to spend your time. Then I discovered that there was a Windows version that had been released later, and I thought to myself, hey, I'm gonna have to get around to playing that. And a year later, I finally did. Unfortunately, the Windows version was released around 1999-ish, which means that Windows 10 doesn't like it much. I managed to get it up and running, but there was significant slowdown. Fortunately, it just sort of looks like bullet time, so it's not too bad. When there's a lot going on the screen, my game would slow down a little, and it would actually give me time to think and react, which was okay, I guess. So what is Nebula Fighter? Well, it's a horizontal, side-scrolling shoot-'em-up. You are a singular spaceship, there are waves and waves of enemies coming at you. You have to destroy them, and prevent them from destroying you. It's very, very easy to just pick up and play. The thing with me and a lot of people with side-scrolling shooters in particular, or top-down shooters, is that you get into this like sort of zen-like trance while playing them. You know, the gameplay just immerses you entirely, and there's nothing else in the world but you and that craft and all the enemies to avoid. One thing worth noting is that it's not like the modern bullet hell equivalent. You know, it's not a case of, oh, if you don't immediately do this or immediately dodge that way, you're dead. There is strategy and there are tactics to be used, but ultimately, you know, it can be quite forgiving, especially on the easier levels. So in Nebula Fighter, instead of being man's last hope against an alien invasion, you are the alien invasion. You are a scout ship sent out by the alien invaders, and you have to go and destroy the defences in a first contact mission, paving the way for an alien invasion. You're not the good guy, and that makes quite an interesting departure from your usual last hope of mankind that most side-scrolling and top-down shooters had as their storyline. Does the storyline matter? Not particularly, you know. When you're blowing stuff up and smothered in explosions and power-ups and shooting, you don't really think about the greater goals or the complicated geopolitical landscape that you're approaching. You just shoot things. Nebula Fighter plays with arcade-style power-ups. You destroy stuff, power-ups appear. You fly across the screen, power-ups appear. And those power-ups provide you with additional health, upgrades, nukes, and various bits and pieces that you'll need in your quest to destroy everything that moves. Unlike a lot of shooters at the time, Nebula Fighter employed 3D modelling and pre-rendered sprites. So rather than having hand-drawn pixel art, the explosions look realistic. And some of the models do as well. This is typified by the asteroids you see flying across the screen, which are much more detailed than you'd usually get with these games of the time. In addition to the satisfying explosions, you've good sound effects, and you've got the music. The music lasts for less than 30 seconds. Now what's interesting about this is that the CD version of Nebula Fighter has a completely different soundtrack. But for whatever reason, possibly a rights management issue or something else, the digital download of Nebula Fighter that you can get doesn't have this soundtrack attached to it. So yours truly decided to do something about that. While I can't improve the general sound quality of the music, I have made a mod which restores the original soundtrack into the game. It won't be contextually sensitive, and the sound quality will be a lot less than the original CD version, but you'll have the music there, and it's much better than having less than 30 seconds, trust me. Fortunately, the game is very generous and gives you the option to turn off the music, so you can stick on whatever you want in the background, or nothing at all. The sounds of the explosions are quite satisfying on their own. So the poor old defense force send wave after wave after wave at you, and it just doesn't work. It doesn't work for them. They come from all kinds of directions. They can come from behind you, they can come from in front of you, and they can just randomly appear from certain spawn points, and you see them flying in from the backdrop, which makes this game quite different from its contemporaries again. Rather than just staring ahead of you and behind you, or possibly to one or either side, you also have to observe the background, where you can see ships flying and see them coming. Fortunately, the game supplies you with a rear power-up, which is very useful for those pesky craft that come out of nowhere. In the opening levels, it's largely space, with a series of asteroids, and it's easy to move around and prevent yourself from getting caught in the crossfire of your enemies. After a while, a series of rocky formations start to constrain that, and you suddenly realise that you're not just fighting the enemy, you're fighting the environment as well. In the registered version, it gets even more difficult, and because of the way that the textures are rendered, it can be very difficult to determine what is lethal and what is just background that you can safely fly through. Because if you try to fly straight through rock, the game will kill you. Of course, just like every other shoot 'em up in the genre, the best way to solve the problem is by shooting it. So if you see a rocky outcrop and you're not entirely sure whether it's in the background or in the foreground, just shoot it with your guns. They'll tell you. The game introduces stationary targets, and these provide a bit of a challenge. They take a lot more punishment than the other ships, and deal out quite a bit of damage themselves. Sometimes you'll just need to dodge them because you don't have the weaponry to deal with them at the time. Other times you'll have upgraded your powers and you'll be able to take them out for additional power-ups. Most of your time will be spent making sure that there are no fighters on the screen whatsoever. Many of the waves you'll actually destroy before you see what it is you're looking at. And this is a necessary tactic because they will swarm you otherwise. If you have too many craft on the screen, you're in severe trouble. And that's where the nuke button comes in. You pick up a series of nuclear bombs that you can detonate, and they'll clear the screen. This helps you survive when you're getting severely swarmed by the opposition. Due to the pre-rendered graphics, the boss fights are a little different. The bosses aren't that big. A little health bar scrolls across the bottom of the screen when you're about to face a boss, giving you time to prepare. Which you should do, because dying in a boss fight is bad news. Why? Well, your weaponry resets. So you'll be fighting a pitched battle against a difficult boss. He'll get one on you, but you'll think, oh, I've got 7 or 8 lives, it's fine. Only to discover that your weaponry has been decimated. Your sidearms are gone, your upgrades are gone, and you're left with the default. Nukes can hurt bosses, but they only take a little bit of their health, so they're better saved for large swarms. Or if you're on your last life with little health and you're desperately trying to take down the last bits of a boss's health. When you complete a level, the game is very generous and offers you an extra life. And what's interesting about the boss battles is you have the option to take the boss's weapon after they're destroyed. If you liked what a particular boss was doing and want to do it against your enemies, then by all means you can. Though I found that some bosses' weapons are more suited to my playstyle than others. With this new high-powered gun, the swarms of enemies that previously bothered you are no problem whatsoever. But the game does keep you on your toes. With the DOS version, it's easy enough. It's a simple 25-minute demonstration of a standard space-based shooter. The registered version is where the difficulty really ramps up. Caves in the registered version become claustrophobic death traps. Enemies become far more numerous, requiring you to be very prudent in your use of the nukes. Fortunately, after the end of each level, there is the option to save. So if you think to yourself, I could probably do that level again and better, you can always go back to a previous save and attempt that. Eventually, rather than just being big walking tanks, each boss has a strategy that you have to figure out in order to defeat. Most of the time this is doable, but there are occasions where you will need to observe their pattern and learn when they can be damaged or not, and in order to do so you'll lose lives and your weapons. So sometimes it's more prudent to do a level again, and then come at the boss with the forethought and knowledge and plan. There are no logs or additional story elements or anything like a shop that you spend your hard-earned points and currency in. It's all in-game that you choose whether to upgrade your craft or not with various bits and pieces. But the important thing that counts the most is that the gameplay itself is silky smooth, and shoot-em-ups live and die on that sort of thing. Because Holodream went out of business, there is no full registered DOS version of Nebula Fighter. And a Windows version will hopefully survive the ravages of Microsoft in future, but we've no idea. Think of Nebula Fighter as 2 games in one. You have the shareware DOS version, which is a fun 20-something minute romp through a fairly easy and enjoyable space shooting environment. Then you have the registered version, which struggles with technical issues but provides a much greater challenge for the more seasoned shoot-em-up aficionado. So while Nebula Fighter isn't a patch on the likes of Tyrion 2000 or Raptor, it's right up there with Stargunner in terms of side-scrolling shooters, which is a very impressive achievement for a small Italian studio that didn't really go on to do anything else after this. Some might find the difficulty of the registered version frustrating, others might not enjoy the gameplay changes, but if you can get your head around both of those, Nebula Fighter is a really enjoyable shooter, and deserves to be lifted from obscurity and enjoyed by any fans of side-scrolling shooters. For a random European studio, they did a really good job. And if you have 20 minutes to burn and want to destroy lots of ships and asteroids, then this is the game for you.